never forget the moment I became a dad or a grandfather. It is a magical moment every time. But it's also one of the hardest, too. Because in some ways, you're terrified every single day. I'm bluffing. I don't know what I'm doing. Am I doing enough? How can I shield them from harm and pain? What can I do to make their lives better? That's why today and every day, I choose to do everything I can to stand against and battle the dark forces that are destroying our children and their future.
They're not only dividing America along racial lines, but they're actually dividing 8- and 9-year-old children along these lines.
We're failing them.
My son would be alive today if he was in school. He didn't like the isolation. He didn't like being at home.
Last Friday, Spencer Smith left a note for his parents, writing about feeling locked in the house and growing apart from his friends.
All in the name of safety. They're killing our kids. And as parents, it is our duty to stop this madness. Tonight, what's killing our kids? The case of national suicide. Hello, America. Let me open first by saying we're at my home. We're in Texas. My home is completely under construction, not really show-worthy at this point, and we have been losing power for the last couple of days. And as if that wasn't enough, today has been an extraordinarily difficult day for really anyone who has ever had conservative thoughts and listened to Rush Limbaugh. And a double whammy for those of us in this industry. We have lost a giant and a friend. I will have more on my thoughts on the loss of Rush Limbaugh on tomorrow's program. Tonight, I want to talk to you about the literal suicide, but I'm going to start with national suicide first. Critical race theory, the 1619 Project. We're teaching our kids to be activists, and we have stopped teaching them critical thinking. This is so important, and it's all due to the COVID restrictions. In many places, we're not teaching kids anything at all. That's not to mention what the lockdowns have done to small businesses. How many are still not allowed to make a living for their families? You cannot have a country where there are no entrepreneurs and no small businesses. The left is celebrating what's happening in Texas with the shutdowns because of the weather here. Texas itself was responsible for almost 60% of all jobs during the last recession. You can't have a recovery if you don't have small businesses. The only thing that is being taught to the younger generation is that you can't do anything. They are learning right now the government will tell you exactly what to do. And it is national suicide. Our younger generation is getting absolutely devastated. They're being gutted. It's policy after devastating policy. What do they think will happen if they establish a $15 minimum wage at this point? A lot of people point out that the amount of jobs that will be lost or cut, and that's true. But guess what it means for teenagers and those in their early 20s? It will be them that will have to carry the majority of that burden. Who's going to give a job, a kid, a $15 salary? That's almost a manager's salary in some places. That first job you land when you're 15 through 19, when you're working at Fuddruckers or McDonald's, where you learn the fundamentals of hard work, sacrifice, self-reliance. It's when your work ethic is established. Now you're going to lose that. Now you're going to lose that. And mark my words, you're going to see very few people actually working behind the counter of a McDonald's. But our kids are being taught, don't worry, someone will provide for you. Don't worry about taking out that loan for school and college. the government will swoop in and someday forgive all your debt. We are being rotted from the inside out. And it's been a slow and gradual process over the last 2 decades. It has been a direct attack on the social fabric of this country. While conservatives are talking about tax cuts or cuts without spending cuts. Maintaining the status quo is what really has been going on. At least on the right, the left has been busy infiltrating America from the ground up. We let them go into universities, Hollywood, corporations, and most recently, directly into our public and private schools. And they are teaching them one crucial thing, that America is fundamentally a bad place. America is racist, built on white supremacy, and needs to be torn down or burned down, and then rebuilt from the ashes. That is insanity. Their primary weapon is called critical race theory. It is the idea that everything should be viewed through the lens of race. Now, if that sounds like something a Klan member in the 1950s would say, you're right. Coming from the land that saw men like Martin Luther King preaching things like judging people on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin, it is insane. Critical race theory is so nonsensical, and it's for a good reason. It used to be called something else, critical theory. Before that, cultural Marxism, and before that, neo-Marxism. Back when it was the bourgeois versus the proletariat, oppressors versus the oppressed, to tear down the system. But the Marxists learned they need race to do it. Now it's white versus people of color, but it's still oppressors versus the oppressed. They dropped the Marxist name, changed the language, but it's all for the same reason. Burn it all down. How many in this audience do you work for a company right now that is mandating racial sensitivity training or recently created a racial equity position? I need you to understand the Constitution guarantees equality. Critical race theory guarantees equity. And those two theories are they are enemies of one another. Now kids are being taught Black Lives Matter curriculum in their schools. It's all part of the same plan, burn the system down, and its reach is everywhere. We've already missed the battle to slow the spread. Now we have to put a focus on ending it, getting it out of our own neighborhoods. Now, somebody who's been very successful at this is the director of the Center on Wealth and Poverty at the Discovery Institute. His name is Chris Rufo. Chris, I wanted to bring you in because I saw something this morning that was really, really disturbing. It was a story that you tweeted out from a school, I think it was a private school, in New York City that had a whiteness scale. Can you explain what this is?
Yeah, it's actually a public high school in Manhattan in New York. And the principal of this school sent out an email to all parents and said that white parents should become white traitors and advocate for, quote, white abolition. This idea is that there's a scale of whiteness and that the bad white people are the white supremacists. And then you move up the scale towards white confession, eventually white traitor. And then you've achieved the kind of pinnacle of white existence by advocating for white abolition.
Okay, so how do they define a white supremacist? I know how I define. They wear a Klan hood. They wear a swastika on their arm. I get that, but I don't think they're talking just about those people when they say white supremacist. How are they defining a white supremacist?
Yeah, they're not at all. They're basically defining white supremacists as any white person who hasn't developed a kind of critical consciousness, so hasn't gone on this journey of kind of critical race theory-based indoctrination. And you've seen in news reports over the last few years They've called logic white supremacist, math white supremacist, objectivity white supremacist, punctuality white supremacist. It's really used as a cudgel to intimidate people and to shame people basically into their political ideology. And everyone essentially to the left of the center is deemed a white supremacist in this system.
So I'm seeing from something that you tweeted the actual work from, what is the name of this organization that is tweeting this out? The Slow Factory Foundation. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it's a foundation. So the kind of concept and the graphic was produced actually by a Northwestern University professor who is kind of a chair professor of the African Studies Department. He produced this graphic in consultation with this Slow Factory Foundation. It's a nonprofit that works on racial and environmental issues, sponsored by Adidas. So what you see is really the kind of convergence of three dominant institutions. You have a public school, you have an academic, and you have a corporate-funded nonprofit that have converged on this ideology and now are perpetuating it not only through the media, but through taxpayer-funded public education systems.
Chris, I'd like to pick this up with you tomorrow on the radio program. I know we're out of time with you now, but I think this is so critical, and you are leading the charge. Will you join me on radio tomorrow?
Would love to. Talk to you then.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris Rufo. Back in just a moment, but first let me tell you about American financing. American financing is a organization that I've known since 2008. I think they started in 2001. It's a family business. It was then. It still is now. They're out of the Denver area, and they just do business differently. They are actually not working for the banks. They're working for you. Now, if you have a mortgage that you're paying 3 or 4%, you're overpaying. If you have credit cards that are in 10, 12, 15, 18, 20% interest, you can save so much money by rolling that into your mortgage without resetting the term of your mortgage. Please take care of yourself financially first. Nobody else is going to look after you. You need to do it. Lead the way. Call American Financing now at 800-906-2440 or americanfinancing.net. Lately, California has become the canary in the critical race coal mine, and we have our answer. Critical race, this theory, is deadly. The canary's dead. It died of white supremacy. Poor guy didn't even realize that it was full of internalized racism. Actually, the canary isn't California. It's 6 million school children who are now being forced to learn about critical race theory. It's all now part of the state's new ethnic studies model curriculum. And what happens in California will eventually happen in your school. It's 600 pages of critical theory. The curriculum has faced criticism from various media outlets, and you'll see why in a second. And now the document is no longer available online. For some reason, once people start to hear about it, they want to read it, and then it goes away. We need a reminder of how critical theory is just Marxism in a cocktail dress. Or do we? According to California's new curriculum, capitalism is considered a form of power and oppression. The document includes lines like this: ethnic studies is about people whose cultures, histories, and social personalities or positionalities are forever changing and evolving. Thus, ethnic studies also examines borders, borderlands, mixtures, hybridities, Nepalantis, I don't even know what those words are, double consciousness, reconfigured articulations. I don't, did you follow any of that? I got lost at histories spelled with an X because the word history, H-I-S, is his, and it's toxic, so toxic. There is no end to what this movement will demand of you. There is no such thing as, okay, you've taken it too far. There is nothing off limits. It takes what it wants to take, and it destroys everything in its path. And what it wants is your individuality, your freedom, and the minds of your children. The document includes a list of 154 influential people of color. This list includes communist dictator Pol Pot, who lived up to his Marxist name by being a mass murderer. Watch the killing fields, kids. Meanwhile, Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, John Lewis, not on the list. Why? Why is that? Another part of this new curriculum is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement for Palestine, BDS, which would be more accurately described as the Eradicate Israel movement. In other words, the critical race cultists believe that Jews should not be considered part of the oppressed class, despite having the longest record of oppression in human history. Yet anti-Semitism isn't even included in the document's long list of forms of oppression. If you're a student in California, this is what you're going to learn. Marxist causes are good. Everything else is bad. I am so tired of fighting, but we cannot let this movement go nationwide. It is already starting to happen all over us, here even in Texas. The big question is how? How do we fight back? Well, there is no better person to talk to than a teacher on the ground in California facing all of this head on. With me now is William Roosh. He is the co-moderator at the Heterodox Academy K through 12 education community, which, until I looked into it, William, just the name went, I think I'm going to have a brain aneurysm. I think that your school is where I would want to send my kids to school. Tell me what you do.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me on. This is a really important topic, and I've been kind of yelling about it for years and just getting nothing. It's like those dreams where you keep yelling and then just no one hears you. So Heterodox Academy is a nonpartisan nonprofit that I'm working with, and then I am actually a full-time K through 12 high school teacher at a religious private school in Los Angeles. I was teaching public school for 7 years, and then I had to leave. I have my issues with the education system. So I'm actually at a private school now, but I'm also working with Heterodox Academy.
Okay, so you are friends with the Weinsteins, Jonathan Haidt, James Lindsay, Helen Pluckrose, all new friends of mine. Are you cut from the same cloth? Do you come from a more traditional liberal background?
Yeah, absolutely. And
okay.
I think that's why I'm fighting against this. This is not liberal. This is illiberal.
Yes, it is. How come the liberals are all on board with it then? The ones who've called themselves liberal, but I don't think they even know what liberal means.
That's a great question. I think that it's a mix. I think that it's largely ignorance. You know, I mean, there's people who just don't understand that when you change the definitions of words, then it's going to change the way that you view kind of everything going on. So during the summer, for example, during the riots and the protests and things like that for George Floyd, there was a very big movement to elevate Black voices. And what I noticed is all of the teachers that I was talking to and following, they were all elevating just progressive Black voices. And I said, why are you not bringing in other, Thomas Sowell or John McWhorter or Glenn Lowry or, Ayaan Hirsi Ali? There's so many. And what I got from several teachers is, well, are they saying anything different? It's like, well, yeah, John McWhorter says that anti-racism could be more dangerous than racism. So I'd say that's different. Yeah, that's the opposite.
And I just saw a copy of Booker T. Washington's book. In the introduction, a few years ago, it said, we're not sure if any of this is true. It is now labeled a work of fiction. Booker T. Washington. What's happening to us?
I think that there's the PR, and you know this well, Glenn, like the PR of the conservatives is not great. And it's the cliche of conservatives are mean and hard-hearted and the liberals are kind of ignorant or dumb or something like that. And a lot of teachers, you get into school teaching because you want to help kids. I mean, it's a certain personality that gets into education. And
sure,
it's lack of a better term, it's you get a little bit gullible, you're soft-hearted. And one of the things that James Lindsay has said that just really resonated with me is that's what's really pernicious and just horrible about critical race theory is it takes these very soft-hearted individuals, and I've watched this happen over and over again, and it turns them into authoritarian kind of individuals. It changes them.
Okay, but I have to tell you, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer by any. I mean, I'm practically a spoon. But as I look at critical race theory and I read it and just take the next step on thinking things through, it's mainly nonsense, and the critical thinking on it completely turns you off quickly. So tell me how these really intelligent teachers can be teaching what I believe is more nonsensical than Dr. Seuss and not see it.
They're not reading it. So they don't, I've read a lot of critical race theorists. I've talked to a lot of them on my podcast and things like that. And a lot of it is kind of like postmodernism theory is kind of where it's rooted in, Foucault and Derrida and all of them. And that is a way to think. It's kind of an interesting way to think. If you want to go into, postmodernist or even critical race theory, you want to read through it and you go, this is a way to approach thinking. I'm an open-minded guy. I'm okay with reading anything. Cool, let's read that. But it can't be mainlined into everything. It was never meant to be the way. And so what's happening is people aren't reading it. The teachers aren't reading it. Educators aren't reading it. They're taking it on face value, and the face value, it's terrible ideas. You're right about that, but it's very well marketed, and it's very well done in the way that it's done. So if you are an anti-fascist, then you're the good guy. If you're an anti-racist, then you're the good guy. Yeah. And people aren't going beyond that first layer of the onion.
I have to tell you, I'm from what some people would say is a weirdo faith. I'm a Mormon, and being a Mormon in Texas and trying to get your kids into a private Christian school is very difficult. We've been rejected by some of the best, but one of them, actually called me in and talked to me about it, and I said, look, I've donated to your church. I've actively supported your church. I'm not asking you to change your theology classes. I want my kids to hear the difference. I will encourage them to push back and argue, but not to try to change anybody's mind. I want them to hear about all different faiths because they have to make the decision. Nobody seems to want to do that anymore. Nobody seems to want to encourage the speech that is the only speech that needs to be defended is the speech nobody wants to hear. We should hear those things, or we just get smaller and smaller and smaller until we're nothing.
Yeah, there's just no viewpoint diversity, so if you're gonna make Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility mandatory reading, which it is in a lot of schools, then just also give Helen Pluckrow's, Cynical Theories, or Douglas Murray's Madness of Crowds, just so they have another perspective. And if, one of the things that teachers always talk about is we're supposed to model being a lifelong learner. But as soon as you give any pushback, I have had 3 of the last 4 NEA National Teachers of the Year on my podcast. 2 of them won't talk to me anymore. I asked them very simple pushback questions, very simple. And they just clammed up and just, nope, I don't know what you're talking about. They don't want to touch it. So if it's the NEA, the biggest union, the teachers union, it's the colleges of education, and it's California and New York. It's just, there's no speed bumps.
Tell me how this is affecting our children. What does this mean? It can be all different ways, because one thing is I teach high school, so teenagers, one thing about them is they have excellent BS detectors. So, and they're rebellious. So they're gonna push back. And my concern is with the pushback too, because I, like you even said about the school, I have no problem. I teach elements of Howard Zinn, but Howard Zinn is not the only textbook that I teach. So I think that, Correct.
People are going to push back, which is going to be good, but then they could be punished for that. we don't really know how this is going to play out. We really don't. But people are not going to just buy this hook, line, and sinker. They're not. Just how it plays out, we don't know yet.
So you're pushing, and you seem to be as worried about it as I am, and yet you don't know how it's going to pan out. How do you think it's going to pan out? I mean, what happens to us if this continues?
I think I think education is, well, I'm a teacher, so I think the answer to everything is education. So I think education gets out, which is why on your show, which is why I'm all over social media, which is why I'm collecting people, teachers listening or educational advocates listening. Please check out Heterodox Academy. It's not a conservative thing. It's not a progressive thing. It's just the idea of viewpoint diversity is so important. And I think that we're gonna kind of rediscover American principles. You know, like our founding fathers didn't agree. They didn't get along, but they realized that they have a bigger agenda, and they got to work together. They got to compromise. I think it's going to be a colossal waste of time, and we're going to get back to original American principles. I guess that would be my best guess.
I hope you're right. I will tell you, the last school to reject my children because we were into the right faith, which was so bizarre. I went to the science teacher and I said, do you teach evolution? Do you teach the Big Bang? If they would have said no, I would have dismissed the school. But they said, oh yes. I asked how they taught it. They taught it as a serious theory. Great. We must teach our children things that we may not agree with, or we may think is not the way it works, but we have to teach all of it. Otherwise, they're not equipped to go out in the world.
Teach kids how to think, not what to think. And this is not what this is. And on top of that, I just have to say, what we should be focusing on is skills. Like teaching kids skills. You look at the literacy rates of third graders and you can make a really good estimate of what the prison population is going to be like. So if you really care about social justice, let's get kids, especially in marginalized communities, let's get them skills. Let's hold a high bar, high expectations for these kids, give them structure, give them hard skills, and then that is what will lift them out of poverty. Not lowering the bar. Saying no matter what, you are fine no matter what. It's the opposite of what will actually help them, and that's a perverse, unintended consequence of a lot of this stuff.
William, thank you so much. I can't wait to listen to your podcast. I've never listened, but I have a feeling I'm going to be a dedicated listener to your podcast. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you so much for bringing me on. It's important. Thank you, sir.
You bet. Next, literal suicide. The policies that are literally killing our kids. Our sponsor is Rough Greens. Where's my dog, Uno? Uno's around here someplace. We tried Rough Greens for Uno, I don't know, almost a year ago, and he is a completely different dog. I hear from people all the time, all over the country, who have had the same thing. The first thing they notice, if you have a picky eater, a dog that's a picky eater, you will hear the first step that they just wolf their food, that they love it. Then do you see changes? Yeah, you do see changes. I've seen changes in my dog's activity, in his alertness, in his coat, everything. Because Rough Greens has probiotics and omega oils, all the things that we're supposed to have. The dog's diet should have it too. I want you to try Rough Greens for free. They have made a special offer now because they know once people start feeding this to their dog, over a period of time, you're going to start seeing a huge difference in your dog. So all you have to do is go to roughgreens.com. You can get a free bag of Rough Greens. All you have to do is pay for the shipping for it. But they'll ship it out to you. Just make sure your dog likes it and eats it. And then as you go month after month, you will see more and more changes in your dog. It's roughgreens.com/Beck or call 833-GLENN-33, 833-GLENN-33 or roughgreens.com/Beck. Critical race theory has already done an incredible amount of damage, and if left unchecked, it will destroy everything that makes America beautiful. It is national suicide. Our kids are facing another kind of national suicide, This is actual suicide. A 15-year-old kid in Canada captured the effect of the lockdowns in a short film. Watch. Is in the throes of a suicide epidemic, the highest suicide rate since World War II. Even before COVID-19, suicide had become the 10th leading cause of death in our country. But did you know that it is the second leading cause of death among children? And lately, there has been a worrying jump in some of those numbers. But we're not talking about numbers, we're talking about our children. Dylan Buckner, the 18-year-old quarterback with grades so good that his first choice school was MIT. We also have Hayden Hernstable, who is about to turn 13. Aaron Kaiser in Michigan. Anthony Orr in Nevada, who is about to graduate from high school. Trevor Till in Illinois. There have been spikes in Oregon, in Arizona, in Illinois, Nevada. In Texas, a 12-year-old boy hanged himself. This is something that my family has dealt with ourselves during COVID. I spoke about it with Megan Kelly, and that's enough of talking about it. But I understand this firsthand. Suburbs, small towns, cities. It doesn't matter. It's affecting all of us. It's undeniable. The lockdowns have been devastating for our children. Our children need to be with other children in school. And most of the experts agreed. Pediatricians, child psychiatrists, educators, and many, many parents. Kids in New Jersey are literally begging to go back to school. And it's happening all over the world. No one knows the horrifying toll this has waged on our youth more than Ted Robbins. Ted, I understand you've watched my show for years and years, and I'm sorry that we have to meet on these circumstances.
Thank you, Glenn, for allowing me to be on your show. Again, we've been watching you for years on what you've been able to do to try to help people, so we're honored to be on the show. Christian was
Go ahead. I was just going to say, tell me about Christian.
Christian's the most unbelievable young man that you would ever meet. He was a straight A student. He was only one of 3 kids in our large area going to college as a sophomore. He was an accomplished young man from being a star athlete. He was a gold medalist in a world tournament by the age of 11. He already had 9 colleges looking at him in his freshman year, and he just lit up the room. If you've seen the pictures of him, he was handsome enough to be a supermodel from his side. So he had all of the boxes that you would normally check and think that, you know, there's no way that this young man could take his own life, but he did.
Can you tell me, did you see it coming? I know he had a bipolar disorder, but did you see this coming at all?
No, and that's really where, from the parenting side, where I was really wrong. I felt that from a parenting side, when COVID first hit and the lock-ins came down, prior to that, Christian had all of his friends that were coming over every single weekend and was supporting him. So he had good support and good doctors and good people, and everything was on track and everything was fine. But when COVID hit, we greatly underestimated the power of peer-to-peer friends network. We were trying to overcompensate with him not being able to see his friends by playing board games at night and things of that sort. But at the end of the day, Glenn, it just wasn't enough.
So one night he just takes the car and drives to Oregon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one night, and we thought that he was actually getting better, Glenn. We saw in his interaction with the family, we were checking on him multiple times during the day. And then he had what we didn't know as a family, because he had written letters for us. So from a dad standpoint and from a family, we're not looking at it from a speculatory standpoint. We know that the COVID lockdowns was the last kink in this kid's armor and the isolation, because he wrote us that in the letters. And he chose on a late night to take, because he could drive. He was 16. He drove to another state and took his own life because he had given up hope.
First of all, I can't imagine what you're going through. I have had a close call, and I don't know what I would do as a dad. I don't know how I would function with this happening in my family. So my deep sympathy goes out to you. You visit his grave every day, and you say that you often find students there crying at his grave.
Crying at his grave in letters. We are very active as a family now of trying to help one other family to not go through this process and this grief and this loss that we have. But we visit Christian's gravesite every single day. And I'll go out to his gravesite and I will find letters of lost hope from kids that are in his same school. We've had other suicides just within our school alone. And I have went out to his gravesite and I found other students crying at his gravesite that have absolutely given up hope, that have already called into the suicide hotline, that just, again, Glenn, they are just at their ends with. They don't have school. They don't have the interaction. They don't have the sports. Their grades are failing, and they don't have help. Their parents are struggling at home to get home in time to even try to take care of them. It's a horrible, sad state right now. Horrible.
Ted, you and I know, everybody knows, the teachers know, anybody who's paying attention, they've all verified that this is going on. Why can someone like you, in a district where people have dealt with suicide at this time, just like you have, why aren't they dealing with it?
For some reason, everyone wants to look at, when they're looking and talking about this lockdown, they want to look at the statistics for how many people are hospitalized, how many people have contracted it. All of these statistics that they're looking at, but they're not looking at the mental health side. It's not even in the conversation. It's not, they haven't even asked the question to the parents, went out to the parents and said, are you struggling? Are you needing some additional help? They've tried to have some classes internally within the schools, but the parents are desperate right now and the kids have lost help. So it's just as perplexing to me as a parent as to why something of common sense to think that our kids are made up of a physical side and made up of a mental side, why you would think that you can't address those together is just the most perplexing thing to me, and I don't understand it either, Glenn. I just don't.
I hesitate to ask you this question, but I honestly want to know, as a dad, is there anything that in retrospect that you could have done differently, that you missed or you discounted, for anybody who's now facing what many of us are with our children? Any help? Yeah.
The help and the suggestion that I would believe is, don't believe that your love for your child is enough to keep them alive. I thought as a parent, and that's where I was wrong, I thought that my love for my children would be enough to keep them alive. I thought that you give them love and care. And with Christian, I mean, I showed up to thousands of practices and was really involved as a dad, gave him unconditional love forever. And I thought that that would be enough. But what I've learned through this process, Glenn, is that it's not enough, that as a parent, I can't give my children certain things. And one of them is that interaction between peer-to-peer and kids. Think about it, Glenn, when you were a kid and you were in school. Think about it with your friends and the interaction that you had and the goofing off and the ability to make some mistakes and do some really awesome things in school. I couldn't make Christian feel that way. I can't make him feel like his friends make him feel. And that's where I was wrong. I thought that my love would be enough. So I would tell any parent that is watching your show today, I would tell them to get the interaction between your child and other children at all costs. At all costs. Whatever you have to do, get them that interaction between their kids. And I'm not talking about FaceTime and that type of interaction. I'm talking about belly to belly, getting kids with kids that you have and getting them, because there's where the missing portion is, where those kids are helping out their friends by being able to ask them questions. And in some cases, they are not willing to talk or to say anything to their parents.
Ted, thank you for talking to me. Thank you. Our thoughts and prayers are with you and Sarah and all of your children. Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah, same to you, Glenn. God bless.
Next, how does our country survive a national suicide? Our sponsor is Built Bar. Built Bar is the secret to keeping both of my New Year's resolution. I mean, you got to work to look like this. I've been trying to eat healthier food, tastier food. I've actually gone vegan, kind of against my will, but I'm actually loving it. My daughter is an amazing cook. But Built Bar takes care of the sweet tooth for me at night. The bars are low calorie, low sugar, high protein, high in fiber. They taste so much better than your favorite protein bar. They're great for the keto diet. You can lose or maintain weight while indulging in something that actually tastes like a chocolate bar, because it's made with real chocolate. Only 110 to 160 calories each bar, 16 to 20 grams of protein, 3 to 5 net carbs. So enjoy the healthiest thing you'll do all day. Eat a Built Bar. Check them out for yourself. Healthy has never been this delicious. Trust me, I know. It's one of the things I want to talk to God about when I get up to heaven. Why everything that's good for me tastes like crap. Not Built Bar. Check them out yourself. They've reset the promo code for this relaunch. Don't give up in your resolution. Built Bar is the answer. Go to BuiltBar.com. Use the promo code BECK. Get 20% off your next order. Promo code BECK, 20% off BuiltBar.com. I've talked about what's coming for a very long time. In the last few years, we've talked to you about the Great Reset, the Green New Deal, COVID restrictions, the dismantling of the Bill of Rights, the fundamental transformation of America. But what does it all mean for those of us on the ground and for our children and grandchildren? What are the consequences of what is currently happening? Forget all of the circus shows that you're seeing on television. You must pay attention to the big things, like critical race theory. It is now in our government, and with truth squads being formed and algorithms that will find out if you are with or against critical race, you're going to find yourself in a real battle. Look how it's being used to undermine institutions that we used to trust. You know, the military isn't even focusing on potential future threats like China. They're busy standing down to look for white supremacists. And as I told you earlier on in the show, what does a white supremacist even mean? I know that I'm thinking that that's a Nazi, a guy with the armband or, with the hood from the Klan. I get it, bad. But I don't think that's the way they're being defined anymore. And if we're hoping that diplomacy could help pick up the slack in the rest of the world, the State Department and the National Security Council are now prioritizing climate change over everything else. Do you think our enemies are wasting time on any of this crap? China is not reducing their carbon footprint. Meanwhile, critical race theory has infiltrated our children's schools. The left has expanded their assault on the American culture to target the most vulnerable, the young, our children. They are being indoctrinated in preschool. They are now being taught that there is race over character, that the pigment of your skin does decide whether you're a good man or woman. And I shouldn't say man or woman, because there's no such thing as man or woman anymore. Here in America, and this is saying something, because I mean this literally, unions are killing our kids, and they're doing it with the help of the Biden administration. They are, for some reason, not listening and following the science, and they are turning a deaf ear, and one that is so cold and callous that our kids are committing suicide, their kids are being torn apart, and they just won't go back to work. And when they do go back to school, I don't know if I want them there. They're not being taught self-reliance. They're being taught dependence on a higher power, and it's certainly not God, it's the government. Sorry you lost your job or can't get a job anymore, but don't worry, the climate's going to be fixed, and, the government will give you the money. Meanwhile, the Bill of Rights is being systematically dismantled. It's disassembled. Equity and equality are enemies. COVID showed what these governments all around the union are capable of. And unions and corporations and the government all over the world are in cahoots to grant you your rights. We're seeing the fallout already. Children think badly about the founding fathers. They think we live in a racist country. Their souls, their willpower, who they are meant to be as an individual is being shattered. Suicide rates are spiraling. People cry out to the government rather than to one another. We need to help one another and not turn toward the government. You can see where this is all going. We have to be broken for them to come to our rescue. They want us to be the ones to cry out to them just to deaden the pain. The system must break for it to be rebuilt. But individualism is what made this country great and what will save us in our hour of need. Immediately after my radio program today, I found out about the death of Rush Limbaugh. I have a lot to say, and I've talked to a lot of his deep, close, personal friends as well today. Those reflections on tomorrow's radio broadcast. Good night.